Babes in Spyland, The Truth Hurts, Episode 5. Agent Smith's stomach grumbled as she and Agent Milkshake's pulled up in front of the original, infamous Dan's Man Food House. She could practically taste the barbecue before she opened the car door. Hopefully this guy isn't as full of himself as Rob, Agent Milkshake said as she parked in the stall closest to the door. Rob Harker had given them a few leads, but before they started down that path, they decided to go through the original list of people Sci-Fi had called. Agent Smith followed her partner into the patronless restaurant. She'd never been inside before, and she found herself transported to a Wild West theme, complete with saddles to sit on at the bar and the thick scent of vinegar and liquid smoke in the air. Milkshakes took a breath and said in a penetrating voice, "Hello?" No one answered, but the sound of clomping boots on wood drew toward them. The man who appeared stood a good foot taller than either woman and looked like he belonged at a rodeo, with his white cowboy hat and thick mutton chops. "We're not open yet," he glared down at them. Milkshakes pulled out her badge. "We're here to speak with infamous Dan." The man's mutton chops sagged as he frowned at the badge. "I'm infamous Dan." Milkshakes smiled. "Wonderful. We need to ask you a few questions about Sci-Fi and the work he was doing for you." At this, the lines from Dan's scowl deepened into folds. "What about it?" "We understand he was working on a machine that not only wafted the scent of your food, but used specific combinations to attract different demographics." Milkshakes kept her gaze steady, and, even though she had to crane her neck to look up at him, her firm and resolved voice caused the big man to step back. He cleared his throat. "That's right. He's working on a new marketing scheme that the board came up with a few months ago." When he didn't say more, Milkshakes added, And he was working for me." Infamous Dan waved his hands around. "End of story. As a matter of fact, I'd love to talk to him. My next batch of barbecue chicken scent was due yesterday, and I haven't heard a peep out of him yet." "That's because he's missing," Milkshakes said between scribbling notes into her planner. Agent Smith watched the man's reaction closely. His eyes widened and his jaw worked for a second before he answered. "Missing? But I talked to him just a few days ago." Agent Smith drew his attention, pulled the dilapidated list from her purse, and unfolded it. "You are among the last people he contacted." After making a show of studying the paper, she looked up at Dan. "What did you two talk about?" Dan sniffed and let his eyes roam over Agent Smith's curves, which she ignored. "Just business." Agent Milkshakes gave him her flat stare, and Agent Smith made a mental note not to be on the receiving end of one of those. Dan held up a hand. "I called to check on the status of my order, and he said it would be finished the next day. That's all we talked about, and I haven't heard from him since." It felt like this was going to be a dead-end lead, but a small detail could be important. "Did he say anything out of the ordinary?" Agent Smith asked. "Have you ever talked to him?" Dan shook his head. "Nothing he says is ordinary." Agent Smith had gathered that much in their investigation. "Did he seem stressed?" "Distracted is more like it. I had to ask him about my order 3 times before he finally gave me a straight answer." "You didn't find that odd?" Agent Smith pressed. Dan's dark eyes narrowed. "Like I said, have you ever talked to him?" "We have." Milkshakes pulled a card from her wallet. She offered it to Dan, who moved to take it, before she snatched it away. "What about any odd noises in the background of the conversation?" Dan frowned. There was loud rap music, which isn't normal for him." He looked at Agent Smith. "I prefer country myself, but this was unusually terrible." Milkshakes raised an eyebrow. "Anything else?" This time Dan thought for a second. "No. Sci-Fi was distracted, but that's normal. Just the music was different." This time Milkshakes allowed the man to take the card. "If you can think of anything else that might help us, please let us know." Next stop, the girlfriend, Lucy Yak. They arrived in the run-down neighborhood a few minutes later. All of the shabby apartment buildings looked the same, with once red bricks and dark water stains streaking from the rain pipes. "Is this the right place?" Milkshakes asked, pulling up to the curb and putting the car into park. "Looks like it." Agent Smith read the report again. "2nd floor, apartment 6. "Okay, let's do it." They got out of the vehicle and headed up the stairs, through the door, and into the small lobby of the building. A threadbare rug covered about half of the floor, the pattern long ago rubbed away, leaving only a dirty smear behind. Mailboxes lined one wall, and an elevator stood in front of them with the stairs on the left. Agent Smith could handle small places if she absolutely had to, But she had a real problem with death traps, and even though she couldn't see the elevator car, she could picture the frayed cables it hung from. She looked at her partner, who was looking at her. "After you," Agent Milkshakes gestured to the doorway next to the elevator. "You're too kind." The carpet on the stairs had been ground into the wood, and Agent Smith wondered just how old this place was, or if it was the mileage that made it so run down. The scent of stale cigarette smoke and old garbage filled her nostrils, and she had to resist the urge to make a face. The second floor could have been featured in a horror film. When they started walking, the first door on their right creeped open a crack, and a single eyeball inspected them. As soon as Agent Smith's gaze met the residents, the door shut with a thud. Other than that, silence greeted them. "Nice place," Agent Milkshake said as she moved ahead of Agent Smith. The floors moaned as she led the way down the hall. Agent Smith glanced back and forth, half expecting someone to jump out of an apartment and start screaming at them. Agent Milkshake stopped in front of a door covered in peeling red paint with a gold number 6 above it. She scrutinized the light coming from between the door and the frame, gazed in the peephole, raised her hand, and knocked. The noise echoed through the air, rolling down the empty hallway like smoke from a fire. Agent Milkshakes stuck her finger over the peephole, a look of boredom on her face. Keeping one eye on the door, Agent Smith glanced back the way they had come. All quiet. Not even a spider clamoring for the corner, or the token baby crying. The place really did feel like a horror movie. Only the sun was shining, and they weren't here to see anyone crazy. She took that thought back the moment the door to apartment 6 opened. A woman, hard to tell the age with the amount of makeup, not to mention the pink hair, extra-tight black pleather pants, and tube top, answered, her fingers fumbling to put on a third earring. The moment she saw the 2 women standing there, she jumped back. Her hand flew from her ear to the door, but Agent Milkshake stepped forward, thrusting her hip out to keep it from closing. "Lucy Yack?" Agent Milkshake said, pulling her badge out of her jacket pocket. They had a photo of the woman, so Agent Smith knew this was her. "Who's askin'?" Lucy's gaze darted between the 2 agents. "I'm Agent Milkshakes, and this is my partner, Agent Smith," Milkshakes pointed. "We're here to ask you a few questions about Psi-5. The scowl on Lucy's face deepened, and her eyes narrowed. "What about him?" "May we come in?" "No." She continued to glare and didn't move. Agent Milkshakes nodded and pursed her lips together. "Okay, we can ask you out here. We have confirmation from Psi-5's sister that you and he are an item." "Were." Lucy held up a finger, dark purple nail polish glittering in the light. "We were an item." "Did the 2 of you have a falling out?" "You could say that." The look on her face, the "I dare you to ask me about it" gleam in her eye, told Agent Smith that it would be easy to get her talking. Apparently, Agent Milkshakes had caught the same vibe, because she shook her head and sighed, "Men." That's literally all it took. "You're damn right about that," Lucy blurted out, throwing her hands above her head. "Do you know what he did to me?" Both agents shook their heads. Agent Smith didn't want to interrupt this train wreck. "You know he's a scientist, right? A scientist. One of the nice guys. Save the world and all that crap." This time she jabbed her finger down the hall and toward the window at the end. "So what do I find out he's working on? Huh?" The volume of her voice continued to rise, and she took a step forward. "He gives me a candle. See? Says he and his sisters are going into business for themselves. Okay, I'm down with that. And the candle is a shot glass, so what the hell, right? I say sure." Agent Smith could already tell this was going to be an epic story. Lucy folded her arms across her stomach and slouched. "Then he comes over all romantic-like. Chocolates, flowers, the candle, and wearing what almost looks like a nice shirt. Personally, I think he's hot in his lab coat. Just the lab coat, mind you. Him, me, and the coat. That's how I like it." Her eyes glimmered for a moment. "So I didn't know what to make of the shirt, but he lit the candle, gave me the flowers, had me sit down on the couch, and started hand-feeding me chocolates. Kinky, but I was okay with it." Agent Milkshake's gaze darted to Agent Smith's for a split second, then back to Lucy. The gleam in Lucy's eyes disappeared, and the scowl returned, reaching a new level of anger. "Then, before I know it, I'm horny as a toad, ripping off my clothes and throwing myself on top of him. Which, again, I'm fine with, right? Only his clothes were in the way, so I start to rip them off too. Now you see why I just like the coat." Yeah, this was definitely an epic story. "Anyway," she waved her hand, placing the other on her hip. "I'm getting his shirt off with my teeth, and I find a notebook in his pocket. One of those little ones that cost like 10 cents. It smells delicious, and since he was still working on his pants, I licked it a few times. You know, to get in the mood. Not that I needed to be more in the mood. I mean, she looked at the two agents. You know what I mean, right? The mood? They both nodded. Agent Smith didn't dare look over at Milkshake's now. Making eye contact might unleash the giggle that lurked at the back of her throat. And when I licked it, he grabbed it from me and told me to stop. I thought he was teasing, so I went after him. I mean, what guy doesn't want a naked hot girl crawling all over him, right? But he freaked out, told me to leave it alone. So I did. By that time he was ready, if you know what I mean, and I couldn't hold out for another second. Her eyes glazed over. Best time we ever had. She shivered and wrapped her arms around herself. Then her gaze hardened and bored into Agent Smith's like a drill. But when we're done, and he's exhausted, asleep, you know how men are, I remember the notebook. So I crawl over to it and pick it up. I'm not a genius or anything, not like he is, but I do know what pheromones are, and I can figure out a scientific proof when I see it. New shirt, chocolates, flowers, candle for a romantic element, and the notebook. It's all written there with my name next to it. A hiss escaped through her gritted teeth. He used some of his stupid pheromones to experiment on me. Me, his friggin' girlfriend. He laced that stupid shirt with pheromones just to see how they would work. Agent Smith frowned. She saw Agent Milkshakes do the same. So you see, Lucy said, we were an item. She leaned forward, looking down on Agent Milkshakes, and frankly, I wouldn't care if he got hit by a bus. It would be nicer than what I would do to him. Agent Milkshakes cleared her throat. When did this happen? Tuesday morning. We just spoke with Rob Harker. He stated that Sci-Fi called him asking for a ride back from wherever you dropped him off. Did he? Lucy raised an eyebrow. He did. Figures he'd called that loser. He always turns to that guy when he's in trouble. Had Lucy just called Rob Harker a loser? She went up half a step in Agent Smith's mind. So, did you drop Sci-Fi off? Sure did, Lucy scoffed. I told him we were going to get lunch, then dumped him out of my car on the highway. I left him with his little notebook and his shirt. Agent Milkshakes made a show of pulling out her planner and flipping through it. It states here that he used his cell phone to call Rob. Sure, Lucy shrugged. I tossed that out after him. It kept chiming to check in and I couldn't make it stop. And since the last time we broke it while we were... She shook her head. Never mind. The last time it was broke, like 10 agents showed up in less than 15 minutes, so I didn't want to mess with it. So you left him? Agent Smith asked as Agent Milkshake's phone went off, and she turned away to answer it. Yeah, I left him. Which way were you driving and what time was this? I was driving north, and you can check the time on my Instapic. I posted about it right after I threw him out of the car. What's your account name? Pink Hottie Now. Got it, Agent Smith said, committing that to memory and torn between blocking this entire conversation from her mind or writing it down as soon as she got back to the car. Are you sure? Agent Milkshakes demanded into her phone. Agent Smith knew that tone. It meant trouble. Is that the last time you saw or heard from Sci-Fi? He texted me like 1,000 times, but I didn't bother to answer. Then I turned my phone off and got drunk. Did anyone see you on the freeway? Sure. Plenty of people. I pulled onto the shoulder and tossed him out. The freeway was packed. Do you have any idea where he could have gone from there? Don't know. Don't care. Agent Milkshakes shoved her phone back in her pocket and rejoined them. Anything else? She asked in a brisk voice. I think that's everything, Agent Smith said, trying to read her partner's blank expression. Here's my card. Milkshakes offered it to Lucy. Take it. Don't lose it. Call me if you think of anything that might help us find him. No one has seen him since you dumped him on the freeway, and Rob was the last known person to talk with him. We have to go, but we'll be in touch. Lucy's mouth opened like she wanted to say something, but Milkshakes grabbed Agent Smith by the elbow and propelled her down the hall back to the stairs. Agent Smith knew better than to ask what the problem was until they were back on the street. What is it? Agent Milkshakes opened the door and looked across the car at Agent Smith. The last project of Sci-Fi's, the one they couldn't get into before, turns out he was working on memory-enhancing sense for interrogation techniques. Not knowing exactly what that meant, Agent Smith got into the car and asked, and the problem is? The problem is that our team back at the office found at least 3 foreign powers that are trying to get a hold of it, and movement from one of them was reported at the airport close to here just 3 days ago.